entities me and my neighbors had to deal with back in 2005. Moving a house in the outback in South Australia in 2005. Pretty much every single person living in our street had only lived there for under 5 years, apart from an elderly couple that lived at the end of the street. This elderly couple had lived in the street for 40 years and had raised their children in the street. They said strange things happened on that street, and a lot of people can't handle it and leave. They never really went into what scared people, just saying the whole street was haunted or something like that. But they did say it only started happening in the early 90s. First experience I had was a week after moving in. I heard a low-pitched humming sound coming from outside my bedroom window. When I looked out, I saw this tall black figure with long arms and long fingers, with no facial features. He was slightly transparent. He was backed up against a wall holding up the garage area of my house. Due to its height, he had to hunch over. I was looking out for around 5 seconds before it realized I was looking at it. It turned its head towards me, and I quickly ran away from the window and ran and told my parents. My dad went out and saw nothing was there. I sketched what I saw, pic related. I started hanging out with the neighborhood kids. We were all teenagers, and they told me their stories, and all described the same figures that I had seen. One of the kids was Aboriginal, and we would go visit his grandfather a lot. He called the entities Mayamula, which translated roughly to stranger man. He said that the Aboriginals in the area had been dealing with them long before the arrival of Europeans, and said that they weren't of the land, which kind of meant that they didn't belong there, or weren't native to there, and that they would take children away and eat them. He said that the Aboriginals cast them behind the creek, but since the creek partially dried up, the Mayamula had once again been able to get into the town. The town that I lived in was built directly over the previous Aboriginal settlement. This Aboriginal tribe wasn't nomadic and had remained in a small area for over 1,000 years. One day, me and my friends were playing cricket out on the flat patch of desert in between the road and my house. The sun was setting, and as we were packing up our stuff, we noticed that there were people off in the distance approaching the road. The closer they got, the more details we could see, and we noticed that they were fully black, tall, and they weren't walking, but floating. We could also hear a low-pitched humming sound that got louder the closer they got. We bolted back to my house and told my parents, but my parents, once again, didn't believe us. I hassled my father enough to drive down on his motorbike to the area that we saw them approaching. After 9 minutes, he came back to the house, visibly shaken, saying that he saw them, and that I was not to go down there anymore. Every time I tried to get details on what happened, he would always change the subject. One night, I was coming home from a party with my friends, and as we passed the empty lot in the street, we saw these two small figures sitting on tree stumps, just staring at us. One was bigger than the other, and once again, we heard a low-pitched humming sound. We were all high as fuck and were just standing there, laughing, thinking we were tripping out, until we realized that we were all seeing the exact same thing, and we couldn't all be hallucinating the same thing. One of my mates took a step towards the one closer to us, and when he did, it made this very deep growl. I had never heard anything like it, and to make a long story short, we screamed and ran to my house. I'm mentioning this because, unlike the tall figures I had seen, I would see them a lot at night. These things were completely physical and not transparent. They were shaped like babies, but they didn't have a neck. Now this is where shit heats up. There used to be a group of kids that would take their dirt bikes beyond the creek and would go riding way out in the desert, but one day, they didn't come home, and everyone assumed that they had just gotten lost. They were found a week later, all 5 of them. They were alive, but with no food and no water, out in the Australian outback for a week. What scared me was what one of the kids' younger brother told me. He said that his brother had said that they saw a light out in the desert, and they felt compelled to follow it. He said he felt like he was in a trance, and they didn't stop following this light for the entire week that they were out in the outback. He said no matter how far they kept traveling, they didn't seem to get anywhere close to it. He said that if the farmer that found them hadn't actually found them, they never would have stopped following the light, and eventually would have died. Anyway, Getting to the final part of the story. So my mother had gotten sick of me being scared all the time and called her sister, who lived in Adelaide, to come visit. She was a psychic or something. So she comes down, and the moment she pulls up, she tells us not to tell her anything about what we've seen, and that she's going to wander around the street for a while and come back and tell us what she saw. When she came back, she was visibly shaken. She told me that these things were unlike anything she had ever experienced, and that she also had run into the spirit of an old Aboriginal woman. The woman told her that her tribe were a split-off group from the Tharawal and came to the area that would become the town that I lived in to escape the Mayamula, but the Mayamula followed them. The woman then showed her horrific images of these things slaughtering Aboriginal children and eating them through a small slit in their mouth. The woman then told her she drowned herself in the creek so she would act as a spiritual barrier to keep the Mayamula out. She said this worked until a pyramid-shaped pathway was built facing the way the Mayamula had come from. This allowed them to come in once again, not the fact that the creek had dried up. The Aboriginal woman led my auntie down the path to show her something even more terrifying. After eating the small children, they would rebirth these kids to be their minions or some shit. My auntie said these beings are completely physical, and they live out in the desert, and they sometimes come into the town for food. She said these things are harmless and mainly just keep an eye out on people for the Mayamula. My auntie became confused and said if they were killing children just to make them into spies, then what was their motive in the first place? It was explained to her that the Mayamula just seemed intent of inflicting pain and suffering on people. She said that they attack women and men alike, make women miscarriage, cause accidents, and kill the weak. Despite this, they seem to have a personal vendetta against the Aboriginal women's tribe and seem intent on wiping them out, and this is why they remain focused on the town. My auntie came to the conclusion that the Mayamula aren't human spirits, and aren't spirits at all. She believed that they were a physical reproducing race of beings, and are most likely aliens. She said she had heard of similar beings all around the world, and after hearing all of this, we put the house on the market and began preparations to leave. A couple of days before we left, I went on one last motorbike ride where my father had told me not to go. While riding along a dirt path, I saw this rock on the side of the path. It was weird because it looked like it was smoothed down a bit and had some markings on it. I don't know if it's related at all to what had been happening, but I personally think it's someone playing a joke, because none of the engravings on it are Aboriginal, and the engravings on it are all over the place. Anyways, I took it with me when we moved. So, yeah, this is my experience with the paranormal. Thought I would share it with you all, and it would be great if someone else had an experience like this that they could share. Serious panic in the woods. Be me, autist, Sydney. Be out for Friday night drive about 90 minutes ago. Cruising around, looking for a decent, long, quite rural road to open shitbox up on. Find one after a good while. Tearing down it. Nothing down there but a school at the end. It kinda ends in a crossroads after the school, two of which go nowhere, and the other leads on for a fair way into the bush, with the occasional house. It's just been blowing a gale for the last 2 days, so there's a fair amount of fallen sticks and leaves. So, ride is a tad slower than expected. Road is quite narrow all the way. Meh. Shitbox can handle, no worries. Driving down at maybe 60 kilometers an hour, average. No streetlights. High beams aren't the best, but they help. About 5 minutes in, I notice the radio of my car is quiet. Fiddle with volume. Nothing. It's turned right, but no sound or static. Check other stations. Same thing. Little concerned by this. I say shitbox, but my car isn't old, nor in any condition aside from usual 4 years of wear. Decide to turn it off. Continue down this road. Notice on the side of the road that there are what I would call strange-looking plants. They extend about 2 feet high and spread out in the perfect shape of a skeleton hand. 4 tall limbs, and a shorter quote-unquote thumb lower down. Brain immediately draws a connection about them. At first it was one every few hundred meters, but as I drive on, they become more and more dense. About 5 kilometers down this road, and the surface seems to suddenly become darker. The random debris and sticks on the road disappear. So, ride is now a lot quieter. Drive on feeling a little uneasy for another few kilometers until I reach the end of the road. Road ends at a gate for a fire trail. I passed another entrance to something similar about 1 kilometer before the end. Head back, still feeling uneasy. Arrive at what seems like the entrance to a national park. Can't read sign from car. Get out with torch. I start walking over to it, and I'm about 10 feet from the car when I suddenly realize something is very fucking wrong. The wind has stopped. It was windy all the time that I've been driving, and it's still windy as I'm typing this. But as I was standing there, total stillness. Silence. Serious fucking silence. I don't know how many of you are from Australia, but normally the bush has some noise. Even quiet, but there was nothing here. Fuck the sign. Really starting to freak out now. Retreat back to car. Left the lights on and door open, thank fuck. Get back in car. Sit there before I turn the engine back on. Real fucking uneasy, but for some reason, I turned the lights off for a split second. There are no houses this far out, by the way. The last one is maybe a kilometer down the road. Look at entrance for the park. There's a small orange dot in the dark. Can only guess it was the light of a cigarette end. And I have no plan on sticking around to see who's out this far. With no car, punching darts in the pitch black. Gun it out of there. Seriously freaking the fuck out at this point. Desperate to get off this fucking road, to see a building, to see light or any sign of civilization. Tearing down this road. Don't feel much better coming to the first houses. Keep driving excessively fast for the road. Driving on the other side of the road, skidding a little on corners and shit. Come to probably the longest straight in the road. Maybe 5 kilometers from the crossroads. See a figure walking on the side of the road with a light. Initial senses scream nope, but as I approach, I can tell it's a person. I pull up alongside them. Woman, maybe late teens, early 20s. Brown hair and wearing casual clothing. Are you alright? Not really. My bus missed my stop and dropped me off out here. I'm pretty scared. It's just so bloody dark and you're the first car I've seen in 10 minutes. I'm still freaked out from the national park entrance thing, but I heard her clear enough. There were no bus stops down this road, which confused me, and I didn't see any other car all the way. But she was obviously lost and felt uneasy too. Never actually picked up a hitchhiker before, but I felt there would be some unseen danger sitting in the darkness that would harm her if I drove off. Do you know where you're going? Would you like a lift? She looks behind her and around into the darkness. Yes, please. Clearly unsettled from her voice, she climbs in and we drive on. She asks what I'm doing this far out. Tell her I was out for a drive, but I got more than I bargained for, and I tell her about the end of the road, about the silence and the cigarette in the dark. She seems further freaked. I'm not settled at all either, but having another person helps. Tells me she could hear twigs cracking behind her, and in the bush to the side, all the time she'd been there. She'd been using her phone as a light since it had no signal to call anyone, but it was almost dead when I came along. Night in shining shitbox.png. Hang on, did you say cracking twigs behind you? I look at the side of the road. I'm still 3 kilometers or so from the crossroads. On the way there were maybe 20 of the skeleton hand plants every 100 meters. There are none. Not one. No fucking way am I not seeing them or something. They're gone. Okay, that's really odd, I explain to her. Both further unsettled. Start driving fast. Normally cautious with a passenger, but I don't think either of us were that concerned. Get to crossroads maybe 2 minutes later. Tear on down past a school and off the lead-in road. Drive to nearest town to this woman's house. Give her my number before she leaves. Tell her to call if shit like that ever happens again. Wasn't trying to flirt, but she took it without hesitation. Her mother or someone is on the porch waiting for her. She thanks me gratefully and runs to hug her mother. They go inside before I drive off. Pull out. Feeling much better now that I'm in town. Think about telling friend who's been down that road with the other group to explore National Park. Only at daytime though. Decide against it and to write this green text. Drive home and type this up. I swear to the gods I'm not making this up. This actually happened to me only a few hours ago. Drive around at 2 a.m. with a friend. Be in passenger seat. Pass through a road that is in the middle of some forest in the middle of nowhere. Can't see pretty far because it's dark as fuck, and barely any moonlight around. Suddenly, some naked person sits on the right side of the street, right fucking next to where we're driving. Almost hit him, or her. What the fuck was that? We didn't hit them. Keep driving instead of checking, because we went full nope.jpg. Scared the fuck out for the next few weeks, over why the hell there would be a naked person sitting on the street all alone at 2 a.m. in a forest in the middle of nowhere. Thinking about this still gives me the chills. I'll see the said friend later tonight. I'll ask if he still remembers it too. I went back. Okay, fellas. You all remember me from Friday night when I went for a drive and ended up down a quiet back road in northern Sydney. Saw some weird-ass orange dot glowing in the darkness and rescued a girl from what was probably a hobo attack. Well, guess what? I went back for some godforsaken reason, and boy, I'm typing this from the adrenaline rush, but I figured out what the dot was. To the guy who said it's homeless people, you were partially right, but it's a lot fucking worse. Be me, yet again, no more than an hour ago. Driving. Come to Leiden Road. It's just rained a little. You know that fog you see on the ground in cemeteries and horror films? Well, that was everywhere and thick. Driving faster than on Friday because no fallen debris. Uneventful, terror-assing down road. Come to crossroads. Actually stop for the first time and have a major second thought. I tell myself, 10 minutes, no more, and overcome common sense. Can still remember the road and no debris, so I can drive faster. 70 kilometers an hour, average. About 200 meters down, the ground fog gets really heavy. It's actually reducing my full beams, but not by much. Continue at 60. See only one of the weird-ass plants, the rest are still gone. Actually on the lookout for bus stops this time. I can't see any though. Somewhat creeped out by this, but it's just from the atmosphere plus my last experience of this road. Continue driving, getting excessively fast for the conditions. Go to where the national park entrance is. Keep going. Fuck, this corner is tight, I say aloud to myself. Back wheels skid slightly and caught me off guard. Deja vu.gif. Regain control, no worries. I'm good at driving stupidly, and I know my shitbox well. The second I pass the national park, I instantly get the feeling that something is wrong. I don't know how to describe it, but it was like a capsule of fear burst in my stomach. I felt suddenly sick. Feel as if I turn at the T-junction and go towards the fire trail gate, I will meet my doom. Heart is going like a war drum. Since my body won't allow me to turn the steering wheel that way, I do the only logical thing I can think to do. Handbrake turn into the T-junction. Seems like slow motion, but I lose most of my speed. And then, I fucking see it. It's a lot brighter than before because I can see it even with the high beams on. No more than 70 meters ahead of me is a brightly glowing orange dot, smack bang in the middle of the road. The only way in or out of where I was, and it was blocking my exit. All I can really compare it to is one of those roadside reflectors, but there are none down this road. Being the mild autist I am, I brought a few things with me, including a combat knife, a flashlight, and a lighter. I don't smoke. Take flashlight. It's one of those real powerful mag lights. Shine at the thing through the windscreen to get a better look at the guy smoking in the middle of the road. Although it's brighter than any dart I've seen, I still assume that's what it is. It's humanoid, but very dark. Can't make out any clothing or facial features apart from the orange dot that sits right between where its eyes should have been. I freaked the fuck out and nearly shit myself. This dark black humanoid with a glowing orange dot in its head and no facial features is blocking my exit. I stare at it for precisely 5 seconds before it starts moving forward. As it walks, its legs seem to grow thinner but freakishly taller. The rest of it also stretches, except the head. This thing stops at maybe 8 or 9 feet high but continues pacing forward. Mind kicks in. I slam car into reverse and back up to the T-junction as far as I can retreat, still locked onto it. It does not stop moving towards me. I fail to notice the other movement until they are visible, but 4 men dressed in what I would describe as homeless attire emerge from the bush on the side of the park. They are all staring at me. I know they actually can't see me against the headlights, but I swear I could feel their gaze. These fuckers ignore the orange dot-headed thing walking at me and just stare. It reciprocates. They seem completely out of it, but definitely human. Not religious, but I pray aloud to anything listening to help me. Of course, no divine intervention. Thing is maybe 30 meters away from car at this point, fully visible in high beams. I am trapped like a rat. I either floor it, potentially kill it, or have it kill me and ruin my car. Sit here and accept my death, or try and stab a 9-foot tall black humanoid with a 6-inch knife. I get about a second to choose. Decide, fuck it. My life is worth more than my car. Into first, and floor it. As I shift into second, the thing leaps and pushes me to the edge of a heart attack. Its legs recoil like elastic as it leaps straight up. Lands behind me. I can see it in the mirror. Turn, and I can see the orange dot/disc glowing. I can almost feel the rage and malice emanating from it. And then, it screams. The best way for me to describe this to you is to tell you to Google Chuma Scream from the Big Les Show. Lower the pitch by 300% or so, and play it at 50% speed. This deep, human-like full-on scream. This must have been loud enough to be heard by the residents of the nearest house for sure. It was at least 20 meters behind me when it screamed, and my ears rang for a minute after. The 4 men standing on the side of the road, whom I can barely see, start running. Catch a slight glimpse of them in my taillights, but they can't catch a car. Can still see the orange dot though, and it's bobbing, as if it's running. Can't see its body though. My heart is in my throat, and I'm definitely going to throw up. I am in no state to drive. I race my way back to the crossroads and sort of autonomously pull the handbrake on and throw myself out. Vomit like a 16-year-old who's just chugged a bottle of vodka. Retch for at least 5 minutes before I collapse over the bonnet and struggle back into the driver's seat. Drink water. Crack window. Drive very slowly until my adrenaline rush clears and my heart moves from my throat to my chest. Drive home with a mild shake. Can't be arsed pre-typing. Start rambling green text. Hands still slightly jittery. Going to sleep now. Will provide sketch of what I saw in the morning. Good night, X. If I don't return, you can guess what happened. Unknown reflector thing. Okay, I just saw something, and I think you guys would know more about this than me. So, here goes. I was driving home about 20 minutes ago down a road, with bush on either side climbing up a hill. I hadn't seen another car in maybe 5 minutes, when my radio suddenly shut itself and went silent. It was so sudden it scared me. I tried to fix it, but I just kept driving. Maybe 3 minutes later, as I'm coming around a large sweeping bend, I see what I think is one of those orange reflector discs, mounted onto a pole by the side of the road, but it was something completely different. I had high beams on and I clearly saw this fucking thing, all black, with the disc in the center of its head, standing in the shrub just off the road. It was humanoid, but seemed slightly stretched proportionally. Needless to say, I shot my dax and floored it to get home without looking back. If I had a dash cam, I would post it, but here's this shitty iPad drawing that will have to do. I'm from Sydney, by the way. Anon, someone posted a report very similar to yours last year. Was this you as well? Your drawing is identical. Are you fucking with us? OP here. What the fuck? That's exactly the same thing as I saw. If that's proportional, it wasn't that tall, but the stretched proportions are identical. And the orange thing, what the actual fuck? Am I seeing shit or what? G'day, X. I'm not usually one to browse this board, but I saw something tonight that kinda has me spooked. I live in an area of Sydney called Glenorchy. It's in the mid-north, sort of straight up from Parramatta. About a 20-minute drive from what I would call suburbia. Anywho, I was coming home tonight from work via my usual shortcut. Nothing seemed wrong until I was within about 30 meters of what I had thought was a streetlight. I would normally pass it for a tree shadow or something, but I swear I saw the figure of a man, maybe 2.5 meters tall, with the light kind of glowing from in his mouth or on his face. It was too dark to see the features, and I didn't really want to stop, especially considering the second I passed him, my radio cut out. Looking in a mirror, I saw it reappear, and the silhouette cropped up in my taillight as I drove off. Radio came back on about 5 seconds later. Brushed off my nerves and came home, but it's been on my mind all night. Thought if anyone would know about this, it would be X. Was it some Slenderman bullshit?